Ito, tumataba.
Boss, diretso na tayo. Open close muna. Suspend, open, suspend. Resume, suspend. Hindi, resume na lang tayo.
Mag-ano na kaya tayo?
Pwede.
Araw, araw. At sir,
Session resume, ganun lang.
additional reference na lang po tayo para tapos.
Tapos, tapos sasabihin, Secretary General sa direction.
Okay. Basahin mo na lang yung bills.
Sir, 1 minute call.
Pare, one-on-one lang tayo.
One on one eh.
One-on-one tayo dalawa.
One yan. Tugtugin mo.
Kapatid ko to eh.
Nakakaano tayo.
Brother, saka.
Ako
Live
na.
Live na. Sir, live na tayo.
Uy, wala dito.
3 o'clock ah.
Yung timer.
No, the entire project.
Sir, ano natin.
Ito na. Okay na.
Ano tayo? Resolution.
Session resume. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we now proceed with the reference of business and request that the Secretary General be directed to read the titles of bills, resolutions on first reading, as well as communications and committee reports.
The Secretary General is advised to read the bills on first reading.
Additional reference of business. Bills on first reading. House Bill Number 7484, institutionalizing a school modernization and innovation program for public elementary and secondary schools. Representative Suntay.
To the Committee on Basic Education and Culture.
House Bill Number 7485, providing for the identification, assessment, and education of children with autism spectrum disorder. Representative Suntay.
To the Committee on Welfare of Children.
House Bill Number 7486, providing for a more inclusive and responsive student loan program for Treasury Education. Representative Suntay.
To the Committee on Higher and Technical Education.
House Bill Number 7489, creating the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. Representative Villafuerte.
To the Committee on Government Reorganization and the Committee on Aquaculture and Fisheries Resources.
House Bill Number 7490, granting hazard pay to private and public healthcare workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Representative Villafuerte.
To the Defeat COVID-19 Ad hoc Committee.
House Bill Number 7491, protecting consumers and merchants engaged in internet transactions. Representative Villafuerte.
To the Committee on Trade and Industry.
House Bill Number 7492, further strengthening the GSIS. Representative Villafuerte.
To the Committee on Government Enterprises and Privatization.
House Bill Number 7493, mandating the national and local governments to purchase the produce of local farmers or producers for relief and school feeding programs. Representative Villafuerte.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
House Bill Number 7494, establishing the Philippine Virology, Science, and Technology Institute. Representative Villafuerte.
To the Defeat COVID-19 Ad hoc Committee.
House Bill Number 7495, strengthening drug prevention and control. Representative Villafuerte.
To the Committee on Dangerous Drugs.
Resolutions. House Resolution 1157, commending Quartermaster Second Class Raymond Joseph Oli for his heroic acts for the Philippines during World War II. Representative Robes.
To the Committee on Veterans Affairs and Welfare.
House Bill Numbers 1158, calling out all DOH, provincial, and district hospitals to secure inclusive wards for our veterans to ensure that they will be taken care of. Representative Savellano.
To the Committee on Health.
House Resolution 1159, strengthening the House of Representatives CPBRD by increasing its number of personnel to its annual budget. Representative Savellano.
To the Committee on Accounts.
Messages from the Senate. Message dated August 24, 2020, informing the House that on August 20, 2020, the Senate approved the Conference Committee report of the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1564 and House Bill number 6953.
To the Committee on Rules.
Message dated August 24, 2020, informing the House that on August 19, 2020, the Senate designated Senator Hontiveros as additional conferee to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1564 and House Bill number 6953.
To the Committee on Rules.
Communications, letters, and emails from several municipal mayors, city mayors, and provincial governors informing the House on their reports on fund utilization and status of programs, projects, and activities, implementation relative to bayanihan grants to cities and municipalities and provinces for certain months of 2020.
To the Committee on Appropriations.
Committee report, report number 434 of the Committee on Legislative Franchise on House Bill number 7496. Report number 435 and 436 of the Committee on Energy on House Resolution 1160 and 1161. Report number 437 of the Committee on Public Works and Highways on House Bill number 7499.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the consideration on third reading of House Bill 6930.
Session suspended.
Wala na eh.
Teka lang, boss. Meron hinahabol ng mga boss.
Tanong ko kay Majure kung gusto niya na. Hindi, meron na rin. Majority yun eh. Oo. Kasi majority tayo. Boss. Minsan lang mga nalog ni.
Wala kayo. Actually, hindi, boss. Pagbigyan mo si Kong Mikey. Di ba ang rule? Pagka equal, boboto. Hindi pa nangyari yun. Pabotohin mo naman si Kong Mikey.
Padating na yung reinforcement.
Mababatuhan talaga ako balang araw.
Nagmamadali kami ng Sena, sabi namin. Pakina, baka hindi mag-isang player na rin, magpapa kami sa higit.
Oo, kasi walang minority eh.
Oo, mamadali kami. Tapos, nga pala si Masaya na nakakapumitan.
Eh sir, magulang ka rin kahapon. Kukunin mo lahat ng gulay ni Kong Ben.
Ano pa?
Kasabi ko lang kay ano, pwede naman nila mag-third, di ba? Kasabi ko lang kay parang ano na.
Referral.
Kaya ipaalam ko lang.
Additional reference assistance. Approval. Ha?
Oo. Oo. Ito na.
Bumoto na kayo?
Hindi, ito na. Dito na ako sa 4 and 5. Ito na.
Yeah, oo. Nag-ano na ako. Oo, sabihin mo na din ako. Nag-ano na ako. Ito na lang kay grading na ako. Sino bang ating presiding?
Si Mikey. Ayun o. Dalawa ka rin eh.
Oo nga eh. Sabi, di ba nag-text ako sa'yo?
Oo.
Sabi niya,
Ano ka basta pala? Wala pa dito.
sabi ko, tingin.
Yung makaano, alabas.
Oo,
Tali.
makalabas. Oo.
Uy, akin yan, pahingin. Paano ako mag-ano? Pahingin lang.
Baka naman makuha, di ba?
Oo.
Baka mawawala.
Decide. Boss, tandaan mo.
Hindi kasi isa lang naman siya. Mag-mention pa ako salamat sa akin.
Ako, boss. Tandaan.
Hello, boss. Walang tawag dito. Sabi lang ni Mikey. Kita ka ngayon, dumating pa lang. Dumating pa lang.
Yes, boss.
Ito na, mag-umpisa na. Okay na po.
Ikaw na lahat.
No sharing na.
Yung yung second call, ano na lang, sharing na lang.
Ha?
Sharing. May pang second call na.
Hindi kasi... Ayun. Ito. Ay, ito. Ito. Ito pakita ko.
Dalawa daw. Tayo daw yun. Mic mo.
Ano yan? Second reading?
Hindi sir, election ng election ng White House under i-elect lang natin 13 members ng mga local. Tapos yung concurrence sa Senate amendment ng mga bills. Hindi na concurrence tayo sa Senate. Local bills. Parang magiging batas. Kasi sinunod na rin natin.
Patahin ko lahat. Patahin lahat.
Yes, ma'am.
pwedeng House Bill lang, like, no.
Hindi, kasi actually shortened.
Sige, basahin lang natin to tapos suspend ulit.
Pero titignan ko kung ito na ba?
Ito lang ano,
Election lang ng
election of
designation ng BICAM. Session is resumed.
session resume. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we designate the following members to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill number 6910 and Senate Bill number 1365, institutionalizing the alternative learning system in the basic education for out-of-school children, youth, and adults. Representative Roman Romulo, Representative Aurelio Gonzalez Jr., Representative Evelina Escudero, Representative Yeda Marie Romualdez, and Representative Lawrence Fortun. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The following members are designated to be part of the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill number 6910 and Senate Bill number 1365, institutionalizing the alternative learning system in the basic education for out-of-school children, youth, and adults. The following are part of the BICAM: Representative Roman Romulo, Representative Aurelio Gonzalez, Representative Evelina Escudero, Representative Yeda Marie Romualdez, and Representative Lawrence Fortun. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we are in receipt of messages from the Senate informing the House that the Senate passed with amendments the following House bills. House Bill number 2444, providing for the establishment of Women's and Children's Hospital in the municipality of Pamplona in the province of Camarines Sur, to be known as the Bicol Women's and Children's Hospital. Number 2, House Bill number 6035, increasing the bed capacity of the Western Visayas Medical Center in Maduririao, Iloilo City from 425 beds to 700 beds. House Bill number 6036, increasing the bed capacity of the Las Piñas General Hospital and Satellite Trauma Center in Las Piñas City, Metro Manila from 200 beds to 500 beds. House Bill number 6144, increasing the bed capacity of the Cagayan Valley Medical Center in Tuguegarao City, province of Cagayan from 500 to 1,000 beds. House Bill number 6218, renaming the Malita District Hospital in Barangay Poblacion, Municipality of Malita Province of Davao Occidental to Malita Women's and Children's Wellness Center. House Bill number 6365, upgrading the Siargao District Hospital in the Municipality of Dapa, Province of Surigao del Norte, into a level 2 General Hospital to be known as the Siargao Island Medical Center. And number 7, House Bill number 6499, increasing the bed capacity of the Quirino Memorial Medical Center in Quezon City, Metro Manila from 500 beds to 1,000 beds. We have been advised that the Committee on Health, sponsor of the said House bills, as well as the authors thereof, have no objections to the amendments introduced thereto by the Senate. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the rules, I move that we concur with the Senate amendments to House Bills number 2144, 6035, 6036, 6144, 6218, 6365, and 6499. So moved, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The concurrence to the amendments in the Senate to House Bill numbers 2144, 0635, 6036, 6144, 6218, 6365, and 6499 are all hereby approved. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the change of referral of the following measures. House Bill number 11, from the Committee on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government.
Is there any objection?
House Bill number 201, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill number 432, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill 1484, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill 2438, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill number 2679, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill number 2688, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill 2966, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill 7181, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill 1853, from the Committee on Local Government to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill 3384, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Reorganization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bills number 6124 and 6285, from the Committee on Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. House Bill 7249, 7256, 7280, 7294, 7313, and 7360, from the Committees on Local Government and Government Enterprise and Privatization to the Committees on Government Enterprise and Privatization and Local Government. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion of changing the referrals of the various House bills is now approved. Majority Leader.
One minute suspension, Mr. Chair.
Session suspended. Session resumed.
Mr. Speaker, under the calendar of unfinished business, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 5989, contained in Committee Report number 200. And for this purpose, may we request the Secretary General to read the title of the bill. So move, Mr. Speaker.
The Secretary General is directed to read the title of the bill.
House Bill 5989, an act creating the Department of Disaster Resilience, defining its mandate, powers, and functions, and appropriating funds therefore.
Then we open the
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the parliamentary status of the bill is that it is in the period of sponsorship and debate. I move that the chairperson of the Committee on Government Reorganization, the Honorable Marvin Marino of the 5th District of Batangas, be recognized. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Marvin Marino is now recognized.
1 minute suspension, Mr. Speaker.
Session suspended.
yung list ko dito. Ay, wala. Yung list ko na interpolator. Meron ako dito.
Session resumed.
Mr. Speaker, please recognize the Honorable Lady from the Lone District of Marikina, Representative Stella Kimbo, to interpret the sponsor. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Stella Kimbo is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the good sponsor yield to some questions?
Gladly, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, unahin na muna natin po ang tanong tungkol sa sakop po ng Department of Disaster Resilience. Ang mandato po ba ng DDR ay tungkol lamang po ba sa natural disasters? Dito po sa definition of terms, Section 3, letter R, ay meron po ditong nakasaad na phrase na nakasulat po, unless otherwise specifically indicated in this act, the term disaster shall refer to natural disaster. So ang maganda sigurong tanong dito is, sakop po ba ng natural disaster ang mga pandemic tulad ng COVID-19?
Mr. Speaker, sakop po ng DDR ang mga epidemic and pandemic as a consequence po ng mga natural disasters. For example, a flood or climate change or earthquakes. So kasama po yung health epidemic, and eventually it is a consequence is the pandemic.
Mr. Speaker, siguro konting clarification lang po, Mr. Sponsor. Dito po sa panukalang batas, distinctions are made between natural disasters and human-induced disasters. So again, just for clarification, ang sinasabi niyo po ay considered natural disaster ang COVID-19 at hindi po siya human-induced. Tama po ba?
Not necessarily, Mr. Speaker. Ang sinasabi ko lang po ay as a consequence of natural disasters, which is maybe flood or earthquakes and other disasters, kasama po yung health issue. Now, the pandemic may be or may not be in definition man-made, but it can be a consequence of a climate change. For example, in a climate change, nag-iiba po yung movement ng mga, for example, ng mga species. Nag-iiba po ang movements ng mga species. Small animals, usually nagmamigrate po sila sa cooler environment. And so, there are opportunities na nagkakaroon po ng different pathogens because of this migration. So eventually, kasama po yon sa re-respondehan ng department. I mean, it can be an epidemic at first, but then obviously if it goes on as far as spreads all over the world, it could be a pandemic, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Sponsor, Mr. Speaker, dito po sa Section 4, there is a proviso, and let me read that. It says that for human-induced disasters, the DILG, DND, DSWD, AFP, BFP, PNP, PCG, and the OCD shall continue to perform its functions. Kaya po sana ay gusto ko sanang maklarify dahil may mga ilang provisions dito sa panukala na kailangan tila ang distinction nga between natural and human-induced. And meron din po sa Section 48 na pagdating naman po sa humanitarian relief, naka-indicate po dito, the Secretary of the DDR shall have the authority to provide humanitarian relief in the consequence management of human-induced emergencies. So may banggit ulit po dito sa human-induced.
Tama po, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't prevent the agency from providing assistance to let's say, human-induced. It's not specified here, but mostly this is for natural calamities, but it doesn't prevent this agency from acting upon as a response if there are lives at stakes and other instances. For example, if also the President asks this agency to help and do so, so it does not prevent this agency from helping out, Mr. Speaker.
Right, Mr. Speaker, good sponsor, maraming salamat po for that clarification. Siguro naman po, it is correct to say that the goal of this bill is to provide a more effective and more timely response to disasters, as well as put in place measures and programs that will mitigate disasters. And your proposed approach is to create a new and separate department for disaster resilience while doing the following. Number one, abolishing the NDRMMC. Number two, transferring a unit at the OCD to the new department, DDR. Transferring 2 units at the DSWD to the DDR. Number four, maintaining certain disaster-related functions performed by the DILG, DND, and DSWD. Number five, fostering close coordination with the Climate Change Commission. 6, retaining the local DRRM offices in provinces, cities, and municipalities, including abolishing the local DRRM councils. And finally, mandating joint operational supervision of PAGASA and FIVOX with the DOST. Number 2, MGB with the DNR. Number 3, HCMB with the DOH. And finally, BFP with the DILG. So can the good sponsor confirm that this is the proposed approach?
It is, Mr. Speaker. I confirm.
Pwede po ba, Mr. Speaker, good sponsor, pa-explain na lang po sa amin ano ba ang kahinaan ng current system sa ngayon na kinakailangan po natin na mag-migrate dito po sa panibagong sistema pagdating po sa disaster resilience?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, siguro po, it's better if I give an example. For instance, nung nakaraan pong pagputok ng Taal Volcano, nakita po natin na hindi po tayo talaga handa. Yung mga tao po hindi alam. They didn't know where to go as far as which evacuation centers they should go, how the relief efforts should be done. So, hindi po nila nalalaman kung ano yung mga dapat gawin, nabigla po tayo. So, isa po magandang halimbawa, yung pagputok ng Taal. Isa pa po, when the local chief executives were asking for assistance, they didn't know who to call to. They didn't know which secretary to call to because there are so many different secretaries who can respond. DILG, DSWD, and also in rebuilding. There is no one agency responsible for the plans and which ones should be prepared. So mahina po yung current system natin ngayon kasi nga po hindi po siya integrated, hindi po siya streamlined because there are so many different agencies. And before, time of the essence in times of calamity, so bago pa po makapag-coordinate itong mga different agencies, ay nangyari na po yung mga dapat hindi nangyari. At sana mas na-prevent pa po yung mga casualties. And also, it's the speed of the response is also critical in times of calamity. So, yun po yung matagal nang tinitingnan na dapat po ay matagal na itong departamentong ito na-create. Dahil nga po may kahinaan ng kaunti ang ating present situation, wala pong talagang nagpo-provide ng clear preparation, implementation, and also the monitoring. And also the database gathering, hindi po tayo handa dahil nga po walang isang ahensya na nagtatago ng mga kaalaman na natutunan natin sa best practices ng mga nakaraang calamity. So yun po yung purpose ng departamentong ito at para po mas madali yung pagtugon at mapag-aralan ng mabuti yung mga plano sa mga susunod pang panahon. Pati nga po itong COVID, nasabi ko po yung Taal Volcano ay hanggang ngayon hindi pa ho namin alam kung saan ahensya magtatanong, kung saan ahensya sana po nalaman namin before kung alin yung mga evacuation centers. And these evacuation centers could have been isolation centers in times of this pandemic. Hindi na po sana tayo gagastos ng malaki para magtayo pa ng isolation facilities because we prepared the evacuation centers which could be isolation facilities. So yun po yung rason kung bakit kinakailangan ng isang departamento at kailangan din po naman na kasama yung mga ibang ahensya gaya ng Bureau of Fire, DILG, part ng DSWD para po, for example, you're conducting relief operations, kailangan po ng security din ng ating mga government employees when they do the disaster relief operations. So yun po, Mr. Speaker, ang basihan kung bakit kinakailangan ng departamentong ito. Ang departamentong po ito ay para magsagip ng buhay. So it is matagal na po itong pinaplano. Sana nga po, it is very timely. Hindi na po sana natin inantay yung mga malalaki pang kalamidad upang ma-realize natin na kailangan natin ang departamentong ito to move forward, Mr. Speaker.
In other words, Mr. Speaker, good sponsor, para sa ating mga kababayan, ngayon po ay magiging klaro kung saan pupunta kapag po may disaster. And magiging klaro din po ang accountabilities pagdating po sa ating safety during a disaster. So maganda po ang inyong paliwanag. Ako po naman ay sumusuporta dito sa konsepto ng isang DDR. Punta naman po tayo sa Section 880 na kung saan po ay nabanggit ang konsepto ng Joint Operational Supervision. So yun po ang aking tanong, Mr. Speaker, good sponsor. Pagtitignan po natin ang administrative code, nandyan po ang konsepto tulad ng administrative supervision. Meron din pong supervision and control. Pero tila wala pong operational supervision. At wala rin pong joint operational supervision. Tila ito po ay isang bagong konsepto. So yun po ang aking tanong sa inyo. Sa tingin ko po, Mr. Sponsor, ang issue dito na kailangan linawin is paano kaya po ang conflict resolution sa isang sistema ng joint operational supervision. Kumbaga po, Mr. Sponsor, sa isang pamilya, may tatay, may nanay, may mga anak. Minsan, ang tatay at nanay ay hindi po sang-ayon sa paraan kung paano magpalaki ng anak. Pero dahil meron tayong mga built-in conflict resolution mechanism sa konteksto ng pamilya, ayan po ay nagagamit. No? Sa kasama dyan ang kultura, nandyan din ang religious beliefs. But in the case of a concept called joint operational supervision, anong mangyayari po dyan kung halimbawa hindi po in agreement si DDR at si DOST patungkol po halimbawa sa hiring ng employees ng Pag-asa? Sino kayang mananaig sa ganung klaseng sitwasyon? Will they have to resort to going to court in order to resolve such conflicts? At ang problema pa po, sa tingin ko, ay meron Section 76 na naka-indicate po, and let me read that portion. No court except the Supreme Court shall have the powers to issue an injunction or a TRO against any action taken or projects implemented by the DDR or its agents pursuant to this act. So ang intindi ko po dito ay tila po kung magka-conflict at mapunta sa korte, halimbawa si DDR at si DOST, mukha naman pong lopsided against DOST. ang mangyayari po. Is that a correct appreciation?
Mr. Speaker, during one of the meetings with different agencies just recently through Zoom, there was a proposal proposed by Yusek Solidum, and the correct word, if I'm not mistaken, under the proposed amendment is a continuously call upon a word, which means this agency can continuously call upon the different agencies, but this agency will not be administratively managing the other agencies. So in times of calamity, then obviously there will be some leadership to be done by this agency as far as coordination and all that. But in preparing for a calamity, the correct idea is to continuously call upon so that, for example, data from Pag-asa, from PhilBox can be given freely to this agency. But there should be no conflict as far as who's in charge of this agency. It will be the same setup as far as which agency they belong to. They will not be under the direct supervision of this agency, but only when there is a calamity. But when there is no calamity, the correct term will be call on them, continuously call on the different agencies as far as for preparation. So para din po yung magulang, nasabi niyo po na isang ama, isang ina, so at least yung dalawa pong nag-uusap, parehong department secretary, so pwede naman po yung pag-usapan. No need to go to court because kung sino man po yung, for example, DOST, for example, PhilVox is under DOST, siya pa rin naman po yung head agency ng PhilVox.
So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, you will change the model of joint operational supervision? Is that what you're saying? Or you continue to use the concept of joint operational supervision but with qualifiers? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Sponsor?
Yeah, there will be an amendment to Section 80, which was agreed upon by the different agencies, and the word will be interdepartmental relations and coordination, and then interdepartmental relations and exercise close coordination with and shall continuously call upon the following departments. So hindi na po yung wording na joint supervision. It will be an interdepartmental relations and coordination. That would be the wording of the Section 80, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, we in the minority welcome that proposed amendment. Of course, pagdating po ng proper time, kami po ay sasangayon po kung yan po ay may introduce. But babanggitin ko lang po sa Section 80, there is a proviso here which I believe needs to be clarified, and let me read that portion. Provided furthermore that the said agencies will be under the operational supervision and direct control of the department in anticipation of, during, and as necessary in the determination of the Secretary of Disaster Resilience in the aftermath of emergencies and disasters. So, lumalabas po dito ay before, during, and after, dahil nabanggit po yung before, during, and after, ay magkakaroon po ng direct control ang DDR dito po sa tulad ng Pag-asa and PhilVox. So ang tanong ko po, since you're talking about before, during, and after, isn't that the same as all the time, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, the proper amendment will be done during the amendment period. And meron din pong amendment doon sa pinopropose. Actually, it was a proposal of the Honorable Kimbo that I'm basing the the amendments on. Meron din pong proper wording as far as that section will be concerned. So it will be, like I said, it will be a continuously call upon. So siguro po during the calamity, that's when the powers of this department will be implemented, but not, like I said, it's not before a calamity, because we cannot predict it. It's always we are always in the mode of preparation. So it will be properly amended, Mr. Speaker, as far as the concern of the Honorable Kimbo.
Mr. Speaker, ikinatutuwa ko po na i-consider po ng ating good sponsor ang ating recommendations pagdating po dito sa Joint Operational Supervision. Siguro po, panghuli na lang po, I just want to mention that it is really very clear that activities of both PAG-ASA and PHIVOLCS are scientific and technical in nature. And these agencies conduct scientific research. So napakahirap po na mapolitika ang gantong klaseng mga ahensya. And to emphasize po, no, ang PHIVOLCS at PAG-ASA ay talaga pong mga scientists po karamihan ang empleyado po dyan. Sa PHIVOLCS po, meron silang 7 na empleyadong PhDs. Ang 26 po sa kanila ay may Masters of Science. May 2 pang PhD na in-import from the DOST. Pagdating naman po sa PHIVOLCS, meron pong 7 PhDs. Pagdating sa PAG-ASA, merong 8 PhDs at merong 81 po na master's holders. So clearly po, mga nerds po dito sa mga scientific, sa mga government agencies na to, kaya't mahirap talaga po na mapasailalim po sila sa isang liderato na hindi naman po scientific din ang primary mandate. So kinatutuwa ko po na you will consider po the proposed amendment at the proper time. So yun na lang po ang aking huling comment, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor. Maraming salamat po.
I'd like to thank also the Honorable Kimbo for giving us the proposal, and I will talk to her about the other amendments as far as this section is concerned at the proper time, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Very good discussion and debate, Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Muhammad Khalid Dimapooro from the 1st District of Lanao del Norte for his interpellation.
Representative Khalid Dimaporo is now recognized.
Speaker, colleagues, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Speaker, I'd like to ask if the author and chair would allow me to make a short manifestation and then just ask a few questions.
Certainly, Mr. Speaker.
Go
For my
ahead.
manifestation, I'd just like to state on the record that the province of Lanao del Norte is among the provinces in the Mindanao region which suffer from periodic armed conflict. Creating the Department of Disaster Resilience, which addresses solely natural disasters, may consequently limit the assistance from the national government during times of war or terrorist attacks. The first issue that I have with the proposed bill is that it redefines disaster as natural disaster, making the overall spirit of the proposed law exclusive to communities affected by natural disasters. What about provinces like Lanao del Norte, who are under threat of armed conflict? Or cities like Marawi, Zamboanga, Jolo, Cotabato, who may be made into another battlefield between government forces and armed groups such as ISIS affiliates. In Republic Act 10121, the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, disaster is defined in Section 3H. as a serious disruption of the function of a community or a society involving widespread human, material, economic, or environmental losses and impacts which exceeds the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. House Bill 5989, the Disaster Resilience Act, proposes to separate the definition of disaster and human-induced calamities. In its definition of disaster, found in Section 3R, it adopts the Republic Act 10121 definition of disaster with an additional sentence. And the additional sentence is, quote unquote, unless otherwise specifically indicated in this act, the term disaster shall refer to natural disaster. Unlike Republic 10121, which treats disaster generally as a serious disruption to our communities, the proposed measure provides a separate definition for human-induced disaster in Section 3 PP as, quote unquote, disasters induced entirely or predominantly by human activities or choices. And I'd like to correct the chair, that sounds like the epidemic, such as ideologically motivated conflict or criminality. What is the rationale in making the proposed DDR exclusive for natural disasters? Where has Republic Act 10121 failed that we need to segregate the government response to natural disasters and human-induced disasters? Separating the definition of natural disaster and human-induced disaster ultimately leads to the alarming consequence that is reflected in the proposed department's mandate, that the Department of Disaster Resilience will only help in events of natural disaster, forsaking communities affected by armed conflict. Evidently, Section 4 of House Bill 5989 limits the powers of the DDR to help only in the instance of natural disasters. The provision can be found in the last sentence of Section 4, stating, provided that for human-induced disasters, the Department of the Interior and Local Government, DILG, the Department of National Defense, DND, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD, and other relevant instrumentalities, including the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, Bureau of Fire Protection, BFP, Philippine National Police, PNP, Philippine Coast Guard, PCG, and Office of Civil Defense, OCD, shall continue to perform their functions. Essentially, the DDR is intended to only service the needs of the Filipino people during times of natural disaster, and will leave the task of addressing human-induced disaster to other government agencies. But as we've experienced from Republic Act 10121, in which the 14th Congress had the wisdom to recognize that relief, recovery, and rehabilitation from any disaster requires a whole-of-nation approach. Without a coordinating body, who's going to do the post-conflict needs assessment for the recovery and rehabilitation program? How will human-induced disaster-affected communities access the Quick Response Fund or Calamity Fund of the national government? By separating the definition of disaster to natural and human-induced and limiting the mandate of the DDR, the proposed bill leaves a sense of uncertainty and insecurity because it remains to be seen on how the national government can help areas affected by armed conflict or under threat of war. In retrospect, House Bill Republic Act 10121, Section 6 and Section 7 gives the NDRRMC and chair its powers, functions, and authority with the general intent and spirit of the law being the protection and preservation of life and properties. Special emphasis should be given to Republic Act 10121, its provision saying, for the protection and preservation of life and properties. Because it does not constrain the protection and preservation of life and properties to natural disasters, unlike House Bill 5989. The biggest disappointment that I have in the proposed measure is that it omits conflict-threatened areas from being protected by the law, most of which are found in the region of Mindanao, making House Bill 5989 anti-Mindanaoan. The original disaster bill, Republic Act 10121, does not discriminate on whose lives and properties it shall protect and preserve. And I believe, as a general rule, the laws that the 18th Congress legislate should equally protect all our citizens. I appeal that this concern be rectified by the committee chairs and principal authors. Secondly, one clear objective of the proposed bill is to rid the Office of Civil Defense of its mandates, eventually making the OCD an empty shell. Section 9 of Republic Act 10121 defines the powers and functions of the OCD, all of which are disaster-related and will be transferred to the DDR. Therefore, what are the powers that remain with the OCD should HB 5989 be enacted into law? Republic Act 10121, Section 8, defines the primary mission of the OCD as, quote-unquote, administering a comprehensive national civil defense and disaster risk reduction and management program by providing leadership in the continuous development of strategic and systematic approaches, as well as measures to reduce the vulnerabilities and risks to hazards and manage the consequences of disasters. All functions of OCD, as stated in Republic 101, will be stripped off and transferred to the DDR as a consequence of House Bill 5989, with the exception of a quote-unquote National Comprehensive Civil Defense Program, in which Republic Act 101 and House Bill 5989 do not provide a definition for. There is no clear definition of the mandate and purpose of the OCD should House Bill 5989 become law. If the intention of the bill is to strip the OCD of its natural disaster-related mandates and revert back to its original function, one must ask, what was its original function? We would have to dig 7 decades back into history. The Philippine Law Republic Act 1190 of the Commonwealth era, known as the Civil Defense Act of 1954, was the origin of the OCD and Civil Defense Councils, which was then created for times of war and other national emergencies. During the Marcos regime PD number 1 series of 1972, under the Integrated Reorganization Plan, Civil Defense Councils were retitled to Disaster Coordinating Councils. This is confirmed in Proclamation number 695 series 1991 in President Corazon Aquino's explanation for declaration of the first day of March as Civil Defense Day. Now, considering the history and transformation of the OCD to become the country's disaster coordinating agency, removal of its functions to address natural disasters will render the OCD as irrelevant. Please take note that House Bill number 4, one of the consolidated bills under House Bill 5989, authored by Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano and Deputy Speaker Pulong Duterte, proposes that the department shall assume the powers and functions of the Office of Civil Defense, OCD, and that all references to the NDRMMC and the OCD in Republic Act 10121 shall be understood to refer to the department created under this act, just as proposed in House Bill number 4. It would have been more prudent for the bill to absorb the OCD, its duties and functions into the proposed Department of Disaster Resilience, and not differentiate between natural and human-induced disasters, in which the committees have unfortunately disregarded. This bill, House Bill 5989, has no provision to determine what exactly is the function of the OCD after the disaster-related mandates and functions have been taken from them. Should the committee chairs and authors be adamant on pursuing the division of the DDR and the OCD, I propose they consider that the OCD be given purpose, such as becoming a coordinating agency of the Citizens Armed Force or reservists, in which, in coordination with the DDR, allows it to access the disaster funds for the purposes of disaster preparedness and response to train volunteer responders. Let the OCD and the reservists be the DDR's proverbial boots on the ground. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the committee chairs and the principal authors, especially our chair, Chairman Marvy, for adopting my proposed amendment to allow the DDR to provide humanitarian relief in the event of human-induced disasters. I thank you from the bottom of my heart to the committee chairs and the principal authors. However, in its present form, House Bill 5989 is restricted from assisting in the rehabilitation and recovery efforts of the government for areas hit with human-induced disasters. As stated in Section 31, the department shall be primarily responsible for reconstruction and rehabilitation in the event of a natural disaster. Once again, human-induced disasters omitted and excluded from the rehabilitation and reconstruction efforts of the DDR. The Department of Disaster Resilience should also be allowed to help in the rehabilitation and reconstruction of areas affected by human-induced emergencies, so as to normalize the consequences of the event as quickly as possible. Specifically, the department should likewise be responsible for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of vital infrastructures of the national road network and other national government facilities, such as national bridges, public schools, and regional hospitals affected by human-induced disasters. You know, Mr. Speaker, God forbid that we will have war and then a bridge is blown up. We need the full-blown assistance of the national government that the bridge can be rectified and repaired as soon as possible. God forbid that the terrorists take advantage of this epidemic and pandemic and target regional hospitals, which are our COVID referral hospitals, and bomb those hospitals. We need the full force and assistance of the national government in the reconstruction and rehabilitation process. I would hope that this provision be amended in terms of the ability for the DDR to assist in human-induced disasters as far as rehabilitation and reconstruction is concerned. Lastly, to ensure that all Filipinos can avail of the benefits and protection of the proposed law, the DDR mandate should also be without prejudice to the President's directive to address natural, human-induced, or other disasters such as an epidemic, for the purpose of allowing our President to maximize the full extent of the executive when called upon to save and protect Filipino lives. I strongly disagree with the answer of the chairman to the former interpolator, Representative Stella Quimpo, that you can find palusot to use the DDR to help in the epidemic. We need to be as certain and as clear and as bold as possible in crafting the law. The words should be there that in the DDR mandate, if the president says, you go help in this epidemic, the DDR will be there to help. If the president says, you go help in Hulo, in Marawi, Cotabato, or areas hit by armed conflict, the DDR will go there and help. It should not be interpreted in between the lines or in between the words. It should be in black and white in the bill and enacted into law that when the president gives the directive, the DDR will respond and act appropriately to assist in non-natural disasters. Now, all my concerns have been stated by way of manifestation, and I've also sent letters to the committee chairs, which I hope that they will consider during the period of plenary amendments, because those letters and suggested amendments will address my concerns. But I'd like to ask just a few more questions to the Honorable Chairman of Government Reorganization, because we really need to know what exactly is your plan with the Office of Civil Defense? What's the intent of the bill? Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the Chairman of Government Reorganization to answer this question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Civil Defense will retain some of its personnel which are not related to the purpose of this bill, meaning for the human-induced, they will retain their personnel. However, I agree that most of the assets will go to this department. But let me just say that I received the proposal of the Honorable Dimaporo, and I agree that we shall clarify the sections in which to clarify that the epidemics should be included in this bill. And that was the whole plan on why I was waiting for the right moment for the amendments. Anyway, at any rate, the concern of the Congressman Dimaporo, in this bill on Section 31, reconstruction and rehabilitation powers of the department, it does not limit the department from helping human-induced disasters, such as, for example, of what happened in Marawi. It says that it will be responsible in an event of a disaster, but it does not prevent it from doing response efforts as far as human-induced disasters. In fact, this department will be obliged to help out in any type of disasters. At any rate, for example, in Marawi, there was a separate fund given to the Marawi rehabilitation, which amounts to 3.5 billion pesos. So, in times of human-induced disasters, this government does not take off its responsibilities as far as those calamities are concerned. But this is specifically, I agree, specifically addresses natural disasters in times of preparation, in times of resilience, and in times of response. It does not limit its capacity to help out in any type of humanitarian assistance. So I agree that we should clarify some of the sections in this bill, and I have received the comments of Representative Dimaporo, and we will consider it during the amendment period, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Dimaporo.
Yes,
Yes,
Mr. Speaker, I would like to
Representative
get
Dimaporo,
clarification.
do you change your position from a manifestation to a interpolator?
Well, yes, I would like to just actually not interpolate but get clarification because I might be reading
Please
a
proceed.
different bill.
Please proceed.
Um,
Representative Dimaporo, please proceed.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because Section 31 in the bill that I have with me reads as reconstruction and rehabilitation powers of the department. The department shall be primarily responsible for reconstruction and rehabilitation in the event of a natural disaster. That's what worries me, Mr. Speaker. Because you say there specifically, and this will be enacted into law, in the event of a natural disaster, there's no guarantee once it becomes, enacted into law that the COA, other agencies will misinterpret, the intent of the law. That yes, the Department of Disaster Resilience can help everybody. If that's the case, then we should place that in the law. But unfortunately, in the section that I'm reading, and I want to confirm if this is the correct bill, maybe I have an older version, Section 31 reads, the department shall be primarily responsible for reconstruction and rehabilitation in the event of a natural disaster. So I'd like to confirm it with the chairman if that is the Section 31 that he was talking about, wherein he stated that the Department of Disaster can help outside of not just natural disasters, but other forms of disaster, especially an epidemic. If I may ask the chairman to read into the record the Section 31 in full on what he was citing, because if I am wrong, then I submit, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Speaker, it is the correct Section 31. It says reconstruction and rehabilitation powers of the department. The department shall be primarily responsible for reconstruction and rehabilitation in the event of a natural disaster. In undertaking reconstruction and rehabilitation efforts, the department shall, as much as possible, retrofit structures to make them more resistant and resilient to the effects of a natural disaster. Like I said, it does not limit, it does not prevent this department from, for example, repairing a bridge that was damaged by human-induced activity. This department shall be mandated to repair the bridge because it is part of the rehabilitation, not just of the human-induced calamity, but also any natural calamity that's going to happen in the future. So it really does not prevent all the efforts regarding natural disasters can be done in helping the human-induced activities as far as disasters are concerned, Mr. Speaker. But again, in the period of amendments, I would gladly amend any of the sections just to make sure that the good Representative Dimaporo is satisfied with what I'm saying regarding the issue, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I be recognized for my closing remarks?
Please proceed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Chairman Marvy for his kind consideration, and I'd just like to place it into the record that from the very get-go, this bill, when the committees decided to split human-induced and natural disasters, really struck a wrong chord with me. Coming from a province that was attacked by the MILF I wouldn't want anything like that to happen again to my constituents and feel that the government cannot be there to help us out. So I really thank and appreciate the kind consideration of the chairman of government reorganization that he will help make the law's intent as clear as possible, that the DDR can help everybody. Because this is also about us being able to tap government funds such as the disaster fund. And we want to make sure that we will not be excluded in the region of Mindanao. Because as you can see from the Holo bombings, we still have strife and conflict in the area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Chairman, and to the members of the 18th Congress.
Rest assured, Representative De Maporo, that the Republic will always protect all its sovereign states, especially Marawi, and the thing that happened in Marawi will not ever happen again. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Sergio Dagook of APEC Party List. So moved.
Representative Sergio Dagook is hereby recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, honorable sponsor. Good afternoon, everyone. Would the distinguished chairman of the Committee on Government Reorg and sponsor of House Bill 5989 yield to some clarificatory questions from this representation?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor. Mr. Sponsor, would you agree to this representation that electricity is one of the primary and essential resources that needs to be prioritized in its restoration in the aftermath of a calamity or disaster like typhoon?
I agree, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. As a matter of fact, the restoration of electricity lines should be included in one of the initial responses of the government in the aftermath of a disaster to ensure swift recovery of damaged areas. Electricity lines are key infrastructure, including that of the human interest, as mentioned a while ago by the Honorable Khaled De Maporo, because our electric cooperatives are one of the sector who help Marawi after its siege, restoring the power lines there of Lasurico. So it is really needed in the normalization of basic services and necessities. Electricity allows the victims or affected population to immediately avail their lighting needs and other activities necessary for survival to function. Communications also, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Sponsor, such as phones and gadgets that are essential in modern times needs electricity so that there is an open and continuous line of communication to ensure swift action for rescue or assistance to people in need. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, I have observed that in the proposed measure, there is no provision in the being mentioned, which includes the prioritization of power restoration. Specifically, it does not mention the role of the National Electrification Administration and electric cooperatives in the immediate rehabilitation of distribution and transmission lines to ensure immediate availability and steady of supply of electricity in affected areas. Tama po ba yung observation po, Honorable Sponsor? Wala po tayong provision na ganun.
Mr. Speaker, wala pong nakalagay specifically na provision na gano'n dito sa bill na ito dahil there is an existing Republic Act 11039, an act institutionalizing the Electric Cooperatives Emergency and Resiliency Fund and appropriating funds therefore. Meaning, meron po kasing separate na batas na para dito sa mga electric cooperatives na nangangailangan ng tulong during and before a calamity. So, kaya po hindi nakalagay dito sa bill na ito specifically yung minention ng ating Honorable Dagook.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, I agree that there is an existing law passed in the 17th Congress, Republic Act 11039, the Electric Cooperative Emergency Resiliency Fund. But the fund being mentioned in that law only covers the restoration and rehabilitation of an electric cooperative's damaged infrastructures in areas affected by calamities or disaster, whether natural or humanly induced. The problem, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, is that even if the lines of the distribution utilities, particularly electric cooperatives, will be restored using the funds from ECRF, but if the victims who are still in the process of rebuilding their homes and other social needs do not have funds to buy or procure the house wiring materials, still they could not connect to that line and they could not avail electricity. So, Mr. Sponsor, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, would you agree with this representation that it is necessary for us also to include provision in the proposed measures that will eliminate delay in the restoration of electricity, particularly the houses or the lighting, electricity lighting needs of the victims?
Mr. Speaker, from what I understand, and for the record, the Honorable Dagook sent me a letter regarding his concern. If I understand it correctly, it is about this department providing electrical wiring for households under the cooperative sector. And I read the proposal. I'm still studying it with the other authors because the issue is the cooperatives and other electrical power companies are private in nature. So I'm still trying to reconcile whether DDR can provide assistance, for instance, like wiring, to a private company. But nevertheless, if there is a donation to this department regarding wiring and other electrical components, equipment, obviously the department can help as far as the rehabilitation and preparation for the concerns of the Honorable Dagook. Like I said, I'm still studying the proposal of the Honorable Dagook because of the nature of the private nature of the cooperatives, electric cooperatives, and other industries. It might create a precedent as far as other utilities, meaning not only electrical wires, but also water lines will be included in this bill. So I beg the indulgence of the Honorable Dagook as far as he's concerned. I will coordinate with his office and make the proper amendment when the time comes, when it's time for the amendment proper, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, gusto ko lang pong ipaliwanag na hindi po para sa mga electric cooperatives yung electrical materials na gusto nating isama na magiging part of the assistance na ibibigay ng department. Itong mga materialis na to ay ibibigay po doon sa mga kabahayan, yung mga tao na biktima. Ang sinasabi ko po kanina yung Republic Act 11039, yung pondo na yon is only intended para sa distribution system ng electric cooperatives. Yes, I agree, electric cooperatives are private, but but Congress recognized the fact that electric cooperatives are non-stock, non-profit. Unlike other private distribution utilities, the rates of electric cooperatives does not include cost for rehabilitation. But in the private utilities, that is part of the cost that they recovered from the consumers, because electric cooperatives are created under the Rural Electrification Program of the government. This is a rural electrification program, and electric cooperatives is only used as a vehicle to implement the rural electrification of the countryside program since 1969. Kaya po, nagkaroon po ng batas na yung rehabilitation ng linya ay ipipinance po ng government. But in the case of DDR, ang tinutukoy ko po, Mr. Speaker, ginong sponsor, sayang po yung linya na kahit naitayo na namin ulit, pero yung mga tao na biktima na gumagawa ng mga panibagong bahay, mga maliliit, kadalasan ang biktima dito, mga maliliit po ang bahay. Ang problema, wala silang pambili kahit dalawang bulb, tapos 10 metro na wiring. So, kaya sayang din po yung pondo ng gobyerno pagtayo ng bagong linya, but the beneficiaries ay hindi rin po naka-avail dahil wala silang pambili. So, ang target po ng department, bibigyan man lang sila ng house wiring. Ang ginagawa po ngayon, Mr. Speaker, ginong sponsor, yung sitio electrification program po natin ay nasa General Appropriations Act annually, libre po sila ng 2 ilaw at isang outlet. Yun din po ang gusto kong mangyari sa department, kahit bigyan lang ng ilang metro na materyales, makapag-umpisa lang sila 1-2 ilaw. This is intended for the victims, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, not for the electric cooperatives.
Mr. Speaker, now I understand the concern of the Honorable Dagook. It is for the assistance to the affected by the calamity. So meron naman pong ibang mga pamamaraan, gaya po ng local, the LGUs, meron po silang mga calamity funds na pwedeng ibili ng mga wiring materials para po ibigay sa kanilang mga constituents. And I will make an amendment on this bill na ang departamentong ito ay pwede rin magbigay ng additional funds sa mga LGUs para madagdagan po ang kanilang calamity fund. So, isa po yon sa nakikita kong solusyon sa concern na Honorable Dagook, na it can be through the local government units as far as identifying who these recipients are. And I will try to see if we can make an amendment or accommodation to the request of the Honorable Dagook. Because like I said earlier, kung meron naman pong mga magdo-donate ng mga electrical wiring sa departamentong ito, which is possible, ay wala naman pong sinasabing ipinagbabawal ang distribution ng mga ganitong klaseng pagtulong sa mga ating kababayan. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor. At least naintindihan ng ginoong sponsor yung gusto kong ipaabot na problema. But I would like to respectfully suggest with the indulgence of the sponsor that pag hindi naman lahat ng local government units, lalong-lalo na po sa mga third class municipalities and poor provinces, ay may calamity fund. In my experience, 35 years in the electric cooperative until now, wala pong tulong na house wiring materials from the local government units. Pag tinamaan po, ang inuuna po talaga ng LGU, pagkain, gamot at iba pa. So, kaya po, nagkakaroon ako ng pagkakataon na maidulog habang ako po ay nagiging kinatawan sa Kongreso, doon sa ilang taon na experience ko na nakikita ko, I hope that the honorable sponsor will consider those amendments in the proper time.
Mr. Speaker, I will be willing to speak with the office of the Honorable Dagoc to make such amendments at the proper time, Mr. Speaker.
Yun lang po, Mr. Speaker, Ginoong Sponsor, marami pong salamat sa pag-accommodate sa aking mga clarificatory questions.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to recognize the Honorable Franz Castro of ACT Teachers Party List. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Franz Castro is hereby recognized.
Questions.
Representative Castro, can you repeat your...
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon to all our colleagues and also to our good sponsor. So would the sponsor, Mr. Speaker, yield to some of my clarificatory questions and comments?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you po. Una-una, Mr. Speaker, magko-comment lang muna ako, no? General comment po dito sa House Bill 5989. So, tila halos lahat ay gusto nating gawan ng departamento o bagong ahensya. Department of Disaster Resilience, mayroon for Filipinos overseas and foreign employment, Department of Water, Traffic Crisis, Interagency Management, etc. Sa lahat ng ito, Mr. Speaker, sinasabi na itatayo ang department o ahensya bilang solusyon sa mga problema halimbawa ng OFW, mahal at maruming tubig, traffic at iba pa. Pero nakikita natin na bukod sa nagre-resulta ng redundancy lang ng mga ito, hindi talaga nasasagot ang mga underlying problems. Isinasantabi lang ang mga hinaing ng mga mamamayan tulad halimbawa, Mr. Speaker, ng mga OFW na walang malapitan tuwing nagkakaproblema sila sa labas ng bansa. Sa Maynilad at Manila Water, sa EDSA at pa, sa pangakong pang-andyan na yung bagong ahensya at siya ang sisisihin o kanyang diretso o accountability. Superficial solutions, so deeply rooted issues. Kabalat lang pero puro papel ang inihahapag nating mga solusyon sa ating mga mamamayan. Ang masama, these are real-life hardships na araw-araw na kargo ng mga Filipino. Pero papel lang ang binibigay natin sa kanila. Halimbawa, Mr. Speaker, itinayo ang Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Pero nung huling budget deliberations, tayo dito sa Kongreso, nagbigay ba tayo ng karampatang budget para sa pagpapatayo ng abot-kayang pabahay? Ang hekutibo, ano na sa mga aligasyon ukol sa korupsyon at iba pang mga kababalaghan sa housing projects na nagresulta sa pagkasayang ng public funds na supposedly so livable and decent housing units? Nakikreate ba tayo ng enough number of plantilla items para sa personnel ng existing agencies para sapat na nakatugon ang mga ehensya sa respective mandates nila? What have we done decisively to address the housing backlog and to eradicate poverty and that is behind homelessness? Kaya po, Mr. Speaker, uulitin po namin, itong Department of Disaster and Resilience, but this is a paper solution sa kaso ng disaster mean greater loss to the lives of livelihood, greater danger for the Filipino people. Para sa isang archipelago at bansang tinatawag na Ring of Fire at Typhoon Belt, napakadelikado nito. Ika nga ng Time Magazine noong 2030, the Philippines is the most exposed country in the world to tropical storms. Pagkatapos po, Mr. Speaker, ng Yolanda, lumabas ang terminong criminal negligence. Madalas na nasabi ng mga nasalanta ng Yolanda survivors. Survivors nga kami, pero we are being made victims twice and thrice, over and over again, long after Yolanda. Yolanda Aid, Mr. Speaker, ay hanggang ngayon ay hindi pa rin natatanggap ng ating mga survivors. Yung shelter assistance ng DSWD hanggang ngayon ay di pa rin na ibibigay. Schools na forever na ginagawang evacuation centers at iba pa. Kaya sinasabi natin criminal negligence. In effect, by sweeping problems under the rug and by forwarding false solution, this bill will spell a greater disaster for our people. Okay, Mr. Speaker, tatanong ko lang po, no, una pong topic ko ay yung tungkol sa compartmentalized view sa disaster. So I agree with Congressman De Maporo about his predicament dito po sa batas na ito, no, because nakakonsentrate po ang disaster, yung definition or yung definition po ng disaster as natural disaster. So malinaw po, Mr. Speaker, unless specifically indicated in this act, the term disaster shall refer to the natural disaster. Sa bawat mention sa disaster mula sa framework hanggang powers and functions ng DDR at mga ibang ahensya at unit sa levels ng responsibility, sa funds at response gaya ng assistance, ang tinutukoy po dito ay natural disasters lang. Tama po ba ito, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, under the definition, it is correct that natural disasters ang scope ng bill na ito. But like I said, hindi naman po ibig sabihin natural disasters lang ay hindi natutulungan yung mga human-induced calamities. Dahil ito naman po ay pwedeng may mandato ng Presidente upang tulungan based on humanitarian assistance. At for example na lang po, gaya po ng nasabi ko kanina, hindi naman po nawawalan ng pondo yung mga kagaya halimbawa po ng Marawi. In fact, the 3.5 billion was taken from the calamity fund as far as the 3.5 billion is concerned para po sa rehabilitation ng Marawi. Ibig sabihin, mas malaki pa po yung pondo na ibinigay doon na hindi na kailangang iasa pa sa, for example, sa departamentong ito. So, hindi naman po ibig sabihin ay hindi na rin pwedeng tulungan ng departamentong ito yung mga nangyayari ng human-induced. Kaya lamang po ay hindi naman kasi kaya ng departamentong ito pigilan o magkaroon ng resilience doon sa mga, for example, terrorist activities. Trabaho po kasi yan ng department ng DND. Yan po meron naman pong mga ibang ahensya na nagre-respond doon sa mga elemento para ma-prevent yung, for example, in case of terrorism. Hindi naman po yan scope ng departamentong ito dahil hindi naman po ito nagkakaroon ng mga intelligence funds activities o anti-terrorist practices or policies. So iba po yung purpose na kinreate dito sa departamentong ito. Hindi naman po ibig sabihin ito'y kinecreate ay mawawala na ang response ng government doon sa mga human-induced calamities gaya ng terrorism or kung ano man nangyari sa Marawi. So hindi po ito ang kumukuha ng pondo. Trabaho po ng the whole of the national government to take care of whatever disaster is happening, whether it is natural or whether it is human-induced, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, tama po kayo, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor. So yan ay nasa ayon sa Section 4 that the mandate of the department covers all natural hazards. Tapos nag-list po tayo ng 3 broad classes of hazards. In the phrase starting with the provided in the last paragraph, it is exclusionary clause. Ibig sabihin, human-induced disasters ay hindi pasok sa mandato ng DDR. At sinasabi nyo nga po, ito nga ay, ay mga terrorist attack or human-induced disaster ay gagawain na po ito ng DND. Nakalagay din sa Section 5 yung powers and function of the department. Pero Mr. Speaker, bakit ganito po yung naging pananaw ng bill? Hindi ba ninyo pinakikitid yung definition ng disaster? Maging ito man ay international o maging ito man ay nandoon sa ating RA 10121. Bakit ninyo pinakikitid po, Mr. Speaker, itong definition ng disaster?
Well, hindi naman po sa pinakitid natin yung definition ng disaster, kaya lamang po ang departamentong po ito ay very specific doon sa purpose. There are other departments concerning the human-induced as far as terrorism and other incidents are concerned. Meron naman pong ibang departamento na para doon sa mga cases ng hindi natural in nature. Hindi naman po pwedeng sakupin ng buong departamento na ito ang lahat ng, for instance, how do we prevent the terrorism from happening? Hindi po yun ang mandato ng departamentong ito. Yun po ay nasa PNP, nasa DND, at nasa OCD. Yun po ang trabaho ng ibang departamento. When we create a department, it is very specific, but it doesn't mean it takes away funds from the other departments. It takes away funds, but funds can also be given. For example, more funds can be given to DND, more funds can be given to OCD to respond to human-induced calamity. So, it can be beneficial in the long run. Ibig sabihin, meron pong binigay para sa natural disasters at meron din pong ibibigay para doon sa human-induced. So very specific po yung departamento na ito. But like I said, it does not prevent it does not prevent the department from helping as far as when it comes to humanitarian assistance or response to any emergencies. So, hindi naman po limited. Ibig sabihin lang, dinidefine lang po natin kung ano ang scope ng DDR, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sponsor. So, I think this is a cracked and compartmentalized view on disaster. So, sinasalamin ito ang intended response ng gobyerno sa iba't ibang disasters na paulit-ulit na nararanasan ng mga mamamayan. Halimbawa po, bakit tayo magdi-distinguish ng pananaw at response sa natural and human-induced disasters? Samantalang parehong mabigat ang tama sa mga Pilipino ng bagyo at lindol at gera at pagbabakwit dahil sa militarization o pangangamkam ng lupa ng ninuno. So we believe, Sir Speaker, that the solution to a disaster must be a people-centered, community-based, civilian, comprehensive, and urgent o maagap. And this is the right way to respond to whatever kind of disaster, be it natural or human-induced. Okay, ang ikalawang issue, Mr. Speaker, nabanggit natin na dinidefine yung power ng DDR. Okay, pero sinasabi niyo po, nakalagay po dito sa mga provision dito sa ating batas, dito sa ating panukalang batas 5989, that you are creating a mega department. Pwede niyo po bang tabulaanan ito or do you agree, Mr. Sponsor, Mr. Speaker, that on my impression that you are creating a mega department?
Wala naman pong nakalagay ditong nakalagay na mega department, Mr. Speaker. It is a department that will coordinate everybody, streamline the response capability and coordinate in a faster manner lahat ng kailangan kapag merong disaster. So, hindi naman po nakalagay na ito ay isang mega department. Kung isasama po natin yung lahat na ng human-induced and natural, baka po nga maging mega department ito. Pero hindi po siya ganun ang design. The basic mandate of this department is very clear. It is to oversee and coordinate the preparation, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of disaster climate resilience plans, programs, projects, and activities. It is to provide the leadership for the continuous development and strategic systematic approaches to disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, and rehabilitation. And also to provide a clear, comprehensive direction in the implementation of the plans. Meaning, para po ma-reduce yung natural hazards, effect of climate change, and also we can manage the impact of disasters. So, very clear po yung mandate ng departamentong ito. I agree na malaki po ang scope ng departamentong ito, but to save lives, kailangan po ay malakas. Kailangan po ay empowered ang departamento na ito. Because this department is about saving lives. It is about preventing the harsh impacts of disaster. Gaya po ng na experience natin sa pagputok ng bulkan. At gaya po ng mga kung ano man darating pang mga epidemic, pandemic, or health concerns. Dapat po ay parati tayong nakahanda. And I agree na malaki po ang responsibilidad ng departamentong ito. Kaya nga po kinakailangan ng tulong ng lahat ng ahensya. Hindi lamang po ito nag-iisang ahensya. Kailangan po ang tulong ng lahat ng ahensya at lahat po ng mamamayan. So, I don't see the definition of a mega department, but I wish it was a mega department so that it can respond to the needs of our people as far as saving lives, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, Mr. Speaker. Kaya ko po nasabing mega department ang kinikreate natin dahil una, marami pong mga provision Mr. Speaker, hanggang letter H yung sasabihin ko. So yung sa section 4 po, nakalagay dito, the department shall be the primary government agency responsible for leading, organizing, and managing the national effort to, etc., etc. So, nandun po sa section 4, nakalagay yung parang general ng department. Ganon din po sa section 5A. Recommend to the President the declaration of the state of calamity and the lifting thereof. So, di po ba merong ahensya na nagre-recommend ng ganito? So ipapasok natin ito dito sa department. And letter C, catch-all provisions under general functions. Yung 5A, 13, disaster risk reduction, disaster preparedness and response. Dun po, nasa section 5, 3, 37, and 19. So medyo malawak po ang coverage ng emergency measures nasa Article 3. So tama ba ako? Pwede pa nga sigurong magdeklara ng curfew na mukhang nationwide ang sakop ng kapangyarihan na ito na pwede ring magrasyon ng goods. Tama po ba yun, Mr. Sponsor?
The department, is the question about declaring a curfew, Mr. Speaker?
Yes po, dahil sa lawak po ng coverage, nakita ko dito, on emergency measures, pwede pa nga sigurong mag-order, di ba, ang department ng nationwide na curfew. Tama po bang aking impression?
Pwede po siguro kung merong kaukulang batas dahil ang ginagawa pong curfew ngayon ay based on the local government units based na nasa ordinansa po nila yung mga paggagawa ng mga curfew.
Sa pa pong issue, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, ibibigay sa DDR ang takeover power ng state. Power to take over or direct the operations of privately owned public utilities and business. Meron po bang ganitong kapangyarihan ang DDR?
Alam ko po ay meron. Hinahanap ko lang po yung section na yon, pero meron po.
Okay. Sa pa po ay yung various powers with respect to infrastructure projects like fast-tracking licenses and permits, clearances, etc. to implement disaster recovery and rehab measures, including housing projects. Nandyan po yan sa Section 5C. 4. Kahit administration of tax credits, papasukin na rin ng DDR. Nandyan po sa Section 36D.
Pagdating po sa mga tax credits ay yan po ay recommendatory powers lang po ang departamento ito. They will have to coordinate with the DOF and the other agencies as far as tax credits are concerned. Ang meron lang pong kapangyarihan ng departamentong ito ay dun sa mga donations na ibibigay coming from maybe international countries as far as tax incentives are concerned, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, Mr. Sponsor, Mr. Speaker, nababahala lang po ako, no? Kasi in terms of tax, malinaw pong nakalagay dito sa Section 36D, Section 5C, number 4, na parang merong, ano, no? Although sinasabi ng ating sponsor yung recommendatory lang itong DDR, but we have to review, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor, yung pong mga section na binanggit ko dahil ito po ay mag-ano na to, mag-encroach na po doon sa trabaho ng BIR.
That's correct, Mr. Speaker. And I will take a look at the
Yes.
said section.
Kahit sa pag-determine na pangangailangan kung kailangan ng international assistance, ito po yung sinasabi natin tungkol sa donation, ibibigay sa DDR at sa President. So, yun po, no, yung andito po sa section na ito, yung paano po ba yung magiging proseso doon sa mga international donations kaugnay ng mga disaster, Mr. Sponsor?
May capacity po ang departamento nito tumanggap ng mga donations coming from different organizations, international or local. So magkakaroon po ng mamamanage po yung lahat ng mga ibinigay, donations or funds. So meron po ditong provision na ang departamento na ito ay may kapasidad na mag-manage and mag-distribute based on the law na ibibigay sa departamentong ito.
How about, Mr. Sponsor, the donations given to the LGUs? So kailangan po ba ito ay dumaan muna sa DDR? Kasi sa experience po natin, halimbawa po, Mr. Sponsor, ako po nakakasama rin ako sa mga relief. Dumidiretso po sa mga local government units. So dito ngayon, pupunta muna sa DDR bago mag-LGU. Tama po ba yung ganong proseso?
Depende po yon doon sa nagbibigay, Mr. Speaker. Kung gusto po nilang ibigay sa direkta sa LGU, pwede pong tanggapin ng LGU. Kung ito naman po ay, kung gusto nilang ibigay sa departamento na ito, ay dahil merong mga tax incentives, hindi po hadlang ang international community ay magbigay ng donation sa LGUs.
Okay. Next issues po, the DDR will prevail overall. So sa Section 5B, 2 and 3, sa usapin po, Mr. Sponsor, ng mga kontrata ng settlements at policy sa land use and zoning, the DDR will prevail over policies or decision of other government departments, government agencies, GOCCs, LGU, and other government institutions. Tama po ba ito, Mr. Sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, at Section 5,
B. Section 5B.
B. Section 5. Under the powers and functions of the department,
Yes.
Section 5. Ang Section 5 po ay wala pong Section 5B. Baka po iba ang kopya ng
Oo nga, ano. Baka, ito po, Section 5B, 2 and 3. Sa usapin po ito ng kontrata ng settlements.
Let me just find it, Mr. Speaker. I apologize, I don't have any resource persons around me. So, Section 5 is the powers and functions of the department. Tama po ba, Ginoong Speaker? And then, ang number 5 po sa letter A is general functions. And then letter B is disaster risk reduction. Letter C is disaster preparedness and response. Letter D is recovery and building forward better. Tama po ba ang kopya ng Representative Castro? As far as my copy is concerned, those are Section 5.
Okay, tama po. Ito rin yung kopya ko, no? So ang ibig ko lang po sabihin dito, no, kung magkakaroon po ng conflict, halimbawa po, yung mga kontrata on settlements at policy sa land use and zoning, sino po ba yung mananaig? Yung po bang mga LGU o yung pong desisyon ng DDR?
I think that the DDR is given power to implement for a faster implementation of whatever it is that needs to be done as far as rehabilitation is concerned.
So, ibig po sabihin, halimbawa po sa mga itatayong mga evacuation center ng mga munisipyo or probinsya at iba pang mga nag-qualified ng LGU, so magpiprevail po ay ang DDR.
Ang DDR po ay isa sa magkakaroon ng pag-aaral kung saan pwede dapat itayo ang isang evacuation center, for example. So, siguro naman po yung pondo ay dito rin sa DDR manggagaling, at kung kinakailangan pong mag-expropriate ng right of way, ay meron din pong kapangyarihan ang departamentong ito.
So may mga sistema at mekanismo ang DDR ukol sa pag-accredit po ng CSO at mobilization ng volunteers at pamamahagi ng relief goods na kaiba sa sistema at mekanismo sa tingin ng LGU ay mas effective at napatunayan na sa karanasan. So ibig sabihin na masusunod pa rin po dito yung DDR.
Since may plano po ang DDR as far as relief operations are concerned, ito po ay nakikipag-ugnayan sa mga LGUs kung paano ito gagawin. Kaya nga po, dapat ay may preparation na ginagawa at dapat merong talagang paghahanda ang departamentong ito para hindi po nagkakagulo pagdating ng relief operations.
Okay, under po dito sa DDR, Mr. Sponsor, yung ilalim po ba sa DDR yung halimbawa po yung pag-asa, yung pong may kinalaman doon sa mga research na mga ahensya natin?
Hindi po siya directly mapapasailalim sa departamentong ito. Ang proper amendment po, ang wording po namin dito is continuously call upon. Ibig sabihin ay parating nakikipag-ugnayan doon sa pag-asa at sa iba pang ahensya na gaya ng nasabi kanina sa interpellation ng ating Honorable Kimbo ay meron na pong amendment kaming nakahanda para po klaro yung ugnayan ng DDR at ng other agencies gaya ng Bureau of Fire, PNP, Pag-asa, PhilVox, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, last na po, Mr. Speaker. Pagdating sa pondo po, on funding po, magkano po yung ina-expect nating funding at number of employees po ng itatayo nating department?
Ang pondo pong proposal, ito po ay manggagaling sa OCD, ang karamihan. Ang personal services po ay nasa 1 billion. Ang may MOOE din po na 420 million sa central office, and then all the other regions ay may 30 million spread out, so that's about 930 million. So plus capital outlay of 1 billion plus. So humigit kumulang po na 3 billion ang kailangan upang initially maitatag ang departamentong ito, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Initially po, ilan pong personnel?
Hindi ko po lang
Or
alam
ilang position?
ang ilang kabuuan na personnel, but ang personal services po ay nasa 1 billion. Sa ngayon, with the indulgence of the Honorable Franz Castro, I don't have my resource persons here with me, but I can get the information later on, and we shall submit the information to her office when I get it.
Okay. Thank you po. Yun na lang po, Mr. Sponsor. Salamat po. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the honorable representative from the 2nd District of Lanao del Sur, the Honorable Abdullah Dimaporo, for his manifestation. So move, Mr. Speaker.
The Representative Dimaporo is hereby recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And good afternoon to all of you, Mr. Speaker, who are now listening to us. But I'd like to say that I am from Lanao del Norte and not from Lanao del Sur. Mr. Speaker, before my manifestation, I'd like to ask again, why define disaster? And if disaster is defined, why not put it in the title of the department, the Department of Natural Disaster Resilience? Why hide it? And this I cannot understand, Mr. Speaker. No. So why as if that we are trying to hide it? Again, I'd like to ask, why the natural? Because what I have understood, Mr. Speaker, is that man-made is the responsibility of another department, like say the Department of National Defense. And then another problem, like for example the OFWs, that's another department. And this department is only for natural disaster. But we also attend to other disasters. But the difference is that we give more importance to the effect of the natural disaster than the effect of the other disasters. Meaning that we give more money to this department and lesser money to the national defense for the effect that they may give to a place where there are subversives. So why give special attention to natural disaster and not to the other disasters? Mr. Speaker, that's my question.
Mr. Speaker, this was the proposal of most of the authors, as well as the proposal since, I don't know, I think I heard this in the 17th Congress also. So this has been the, in fact, the proposal also of the President, as far as I know, during the SONA. So I really don't know why they did not include the, why it is just for natural disaster, but it does not, like I said, it does not prevent it from addressing problems as far as response or assistance to any type of disaster. Maybe it was just concentrated to the immediate problem of response to any calamity. But we do not discount that, for example, in the province of Lanao del Norte, there are human-induced disasters. It does not in any way take away the capability of the national government to respond to such disasters. In fact, in Marawi, it was the opposite. It was given more funds to respond to such type of disaster. And like I said earlier, there are other agencies also dedicated to, for instance, terrorism or human-induced disasters. And this is just a proposal from the authors, and I would be happy to get the any amendments from the Honorable Dimaporo in why the title of this bill is as such, the creation of the Department of Disaster Resilience.
Representative Marino and Representative Dimaporo, we can go through that during the period of amendments. But for now, this is the period of interpolation. So please
Yes,
proceed.
Mr. Speaker, now I will manifest.
Please proceed.
What we see, Mr. Speaker, is the unfairness or discriminatory attitude of the majority. What we see here is the rule of majority, enforcing what they want. Most of the natural disasters are in Luzon and the Visayas. But most of the man-made disasters are in Mindanao. And what we are showing here is that we are giving more importance to the natural disaster because of so many things that we have seen in the proposed bill that can help those that are affected by the natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, we in Mindanao have seen the unfairness of the majority from Luzon and from the Visayas, giving more importance to themselves and lesser to us. And this is the reason why there was an MNLF, and then later on an MILF, and why there are still many subversives in the mountains of Mindanao because of this. And what we will see now, Mr. Speaker, is again the importance of the majority. Yes, we will be attended to, but not as much as in the places of the majority. The Marawi siege, Mr. Speaker, happened before this bill. And whatever big amount it received, it is not because of this bill. It was because we were all treated equally in the past. And now, with this bill, we will be treated differently. Yes, we will all be attended to, but not as much as in other places. So this is my manifestation, Mr. Speaker. I think this can be made an issue, as it was also made during the time of the MNLA, the issue that we were given lesser opportunity in Mindanao. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The manifestation of the Honorable Dimaporo is hereby noted by this chamber. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we close the period of sponsorship and debate. I suspend the period of sponsorship and debate.
The period of the suspension of the period of debate is hereby approved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, can I move to suspend the session for a few.
Session suspended.
Thank you, salamat.
Wala pa, madami pa eh.
But I'll consider naman that.
sila. Puro minority yung makabayan. Uupo sila. Yan. Ito. Okay na.
Third reading naman. Session resume.
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the consideration of House Bill number 5989. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Are there any objections? Hearing none. House Bill 5989
89.
is hereby suspended. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the consideration on third reading of House Bill number 6930. For this purpose, may I request that the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the bill and thereafter to call the roll for nominal voting. So
The
move, Mr.
Secretary General is hereby directed to read the title of the bill and hereafter call the roll of votation.
House Bill 6930, an act requiring parents to plant 2 trees for every child born to them and appropriating funds therefore. Roll call of members in consideration of House Bill number 6930. Abante, Abaya, Abellanosa, Abu, Abueg Zaldivar, Abunda, Acop, Acosta, Acosta Alba, Adjong, Advincula, Agabas, Agaraw, Aglipay, Aguinaldo, Albano, Almario, Alonte, Alvarez Franz, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amante Matba, Amatong, Angara, Aragones, Arbison, Arenas, Arroyo, Atienza, Aumentado, Babasa, Bagatsing, Balindong, Banyas Nograles, Barba, Barbers, Baronda, Berzaga, Baskug, Bautista, Bautista Bandigan, Belmonte, Benitez, Bernos, Biason, Billones, Biron, Bolilla, Bondok, Bordado, Bravo, Rosas, Bulot, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kabutyan, Cabredo, Cagas, Calderon, Calixto, Caminero, Campos, Canama, Kawagdan, Cari, Castelo, Castro, Castro Franz, Castro Fedenil, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero, Cayetano Maria Laarni, Celeste, Chato, Chipeco, Chungalao, Coangelica, Co Elizalde, Cuanco, Colyantes, Crisologo, Cua, Quaresma, Cueva, Colyanga, Dagook, Dalipe, Dalog, Daza, De Jesus, De Venecia, Defensor Lawrence, Defensor Michael, Del Mar, De Los Santos, De Losa Montalia, Demaporo Abdullah, Demaporo, Muhammad Khalid, Duavit, Duhali, Duterte, D. Faustino Ino, D. Faustino Michael III, D. Ian Paul, Ebcas, Ecleo, Elago, Enverga, Erice, Erigel, Ermita Buhain, Escudero, Espina, Espino, Estrella, Fariñas Ria, Fariñas Rudy Cesar, Fernandez, Fernando, Ferrer Juliet, Ferrer Luis, Flores, Fortun, Fortuno, Frasco, Fuentebella, Gaite, Garbin, Garcia, Jose Enrique, Garcia, Pablo John, Garcia Vincent, Garin Janet, Garin Sharon, Gasataya, Gatchalian, Gato, Herongo, Edgo Mark, Gonzaga, Gonzales, Aurelio Dong, Gonzales Neptali, Gonzales Sandro, Groseta, Gico, Gullas, Guya, Haresco, Hataman, Hernandez, Herrera D. Hofer, Halusos, Javier, Jimenez, Co Elisa, Co Wilton, Konghun, Labad-Labad, Lacson, Lacson Noel, Lagman, Lagon, Lara, Lazatin, Liachon, Legarda, Limlem Kaichong, Lopez, Loyola, Losotan, Macapagal, Arroyo, Maceda, Madrona, Malapitan, Mangawang, Magundadato, Marcoleta, Mariano Hernandez, Marino, Marquez Martinez, Matba, Matugas, Mendoza, Mercado, Momo, Natividad Naganyo, Nava, Nieto, Noel, Nograles, Jericho, Nograles, Juan Fidel, Nolasco, Nunez, Malañaon, Waminal, Olivares, Ong Jose, Ong Roni, Ortega, Uwano Dizon, Pacquiao Alberto, Pacquiao Rogelio, Padjernos, Paduano, Palma, Pancho, Panotes, Peña, Pichay, Pimentel, Pineda, Plaza, Puno, Kimbo, Radaza, Ramirez Sato, Ramos, Rimulya, Revilla, Reyes, Rivera, Robes, Rodriguez, Roman Romero, Romualdez, Ferdinand Romualdez, Yeda Marie, Romualdo, Roman Roque, Sakdalan, Sagarbaria, Sakaluran, Salceda, Salimbangon, Salo, Sanchez, Sancopan, Santos Recto, Sarmiento, Saulug, Savillano, Xiao Silverio, Singson, Singson Mihan, Sinsuat, Swansing Estrelita, Swansing Horacio, Suarez Aleta, Suarez David, Suntay, si Alvarado, Taduran, Talyado, Tan Bunting, Tan Alicia, Tan Angelina, Tan Shamir, Tan Shari, Tan Sherny, Tejada, Teves Arnulfo, Teves Jose, Tiangco, Tolentino, Torres Gomez, Tulpo, Tupas, Chutor, T. Alan, T. Diego, Umali Alfonso, Umali Maria Victoria, Unabia, Ungab, Uy Juliet, Uy Rolando, Valeriano, Valmayor, Vargas, Vargas Alfonso, Velasco, Veloso Vergara, Villa, Villafuerte, Villanueva, Brother Eddie, Villanueva Noel, Villar, Villaras, Suarez, Villarica, Violago, Yap Eric, Yap Victor, Yu, Zamora Ronaldo, Zamora Waikorat, Zarate, Zubiri. Second call for House Bill number 6930. Abante, Abaya, Acosta Alba, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amatong, Arbison, Mentado, Banyas Nograles, Baronda, Berzaga, Biason, Biron, Bulot, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kanama, Kawagdan, Castro Fredinil, Co Angelica, Co Elizalde, Cuanco, Cuwa, Dalipe, Dasa, Defensor Michael, Duavit, D. Faustino Ino, Ebcas, Estrella, Fernandez, Fernando, Flores, Garin Sharon, Peron, Gonzales Sandro, Gico, Guya, Alosos Javier, Co Wilton, Konghun, Lagon, Diachon, Losotan, Magundadato, Marcoleta, Mendoza, Mercado, Nava, Nograles, Juan Fidel, Nunez Malanyaon, Ong Jose, Uwano Dizon, Panotes, Pichay, Pineda, Puno, Ramirez Sato, Rimulya, Revilla, Sagar Baria, Saulug, Siao, Suarez Aleta, Taduran, Tanalisa, Tanangelina, Teves Jose, T. Alan, Uy Juliet, Veloso, Villaferte, Villarasa Suarez, Yu Zamora Ronaldo.
With 222 affirmative votes, 0 negative, and 0 abstention, House Bill number 6930 is approved on third and final reading. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the consideration on third reading of House Bill number 6931. For this purpose, may I request that the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the bill and thereafter to call the roll for nominal voting. So move, Mr. Speaker.
The Secretary General is directed to read House Bill number 6931, the title of the bill, and call the elections for nominal voting thereafter.
House Bill number 6931, an act requiring all graduating senior high school and college students to plant 2 trees each as a civic duty for environment protection and preservation and appropriating funds therefore. Roll call of members in consideration of House Bill 6931. Abante, Abaya, Abellanosa, Abu, Abueg, Saldivar, Abunda, Acop, Acosta Alba, Acosta, Adyong, Advincula, Agabas, Agaraw, Aglipay, Aguinaldo, Albano, Almario, Alonte, Alvarez Franz, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amante Matba, Amatong, Angara, Aragones, Arbison, Arenas, Arroyo, Atienza, Aumentado, Babasa, Bagatsing, Balindong, Banyas Nograles, Barba, Barbers, Baronda, Barzaga, Bascug, Bautista, Bautista Bandigan, Belmonte, Benitez, Bernos, Biazon, Billones, Biron, Bolilia, Bondok, Bordado, Bravo, Brosas, Bulut, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kabotyan, Cabredo, Cagas, Calderon, Calixto, Caminero, Campos, Canama, Kawagdan, Cari, Castelo, Castro Franz, Castro Fredenil, Cayetano Alan Peter Campañero, Cayetano Maria Lardi, Celeste, Chato, Chipeco, Chungalaw, Co Angelica, Co Elizalde, Coanco, Collantes, Crisologo, Cuwa, Cuaresma, Cueva, Culyamat, Dagook, Dalipe, Dalog, Daza, De Jesus, De Venecia, Defensor Lawrence, Defensor Michael, Del Mar, De Los Santos, De Loso Montalia, Dimaporo Abdullah, Dimaporo Muhammad Khalid, Duavit, Duhali, Duterte, D. Faustino Ino, D. Faustino Michael III, D. Ian Paul, Ebcas, Ecleo, Elago, Enverga, Erice, Erigel, Ermita Buhain, Escudero, Espina, Espino, Estrella, Fariñas Ria, Fariñas Rudy Cesar, Fernandez, Fernando, Ferrer Juliet, Ferrer Luis, Flores, Fortun, Fortuno, Frasco, Pentebella, Gaite, Garbin, Garcia Jose Enrique, Garcia Pablo Jan, Garcia Vincent, Garin Janet, Garin Sharon, Gasataya, Gatchalian, Gato, Heron, Go Ed, Go Mark, Gonzaga, Gonzales Aurelio Dong, Gonzales Neptali, Gonzales Sandro, Goriseta, Guico, Gulyas, Guya, Haresco, Hataman, Hernandez, Herrera D, Hofer, Haloshos, Javier, Jimenez, Ko Elisa, Ko Wilton, Ko Moon, Labad-Labad, Lacson, Lacson Noel, Lagman, Lagon, Lara, Lazatin, Leachon, Legarda, Lim, Lim Kaichong, Lopez, Loyola, Lusotan, Macapagal Arroyo, Maceda, Madrona, Malapitan, Mangawang, Mangudadatu, Marcoleta, Mariano Hernandez, Mariño, Marquez, Martinez, Matba, Matugas, Mendoza, Mercado, Momo, Natividad Nagaño, Nava, Nieto, Noel, Nograles Jericho, Nograles Juan, Fidel, Nolasco, Nunez Malañaon, Huaminal Olivares, Ong Jose, Ong Ronnie, Ortega, Uano Dizon, Pacquiao Alberto, Pacquiao Rogelio, Padiernos, Paduano, Palma, Pancho, Panotes, Peña, Pichay, Pimentel, Pineda, Plaza, Puno, Kimbo, Radaza, Ramirez Sato, Ramos, Remulla, Revilla, Reyes, Rivera, Robes, Rodriguez, Roman, Romero, Romualdez Ferdinand, Romualdez Yeda Marie, Romualdo, Romulo, Roque, Sakdalan, Sagarbaria, Sakaluran, Salceda, Salimbangon, Salos, Sanchez, Sangkopan, Santos Recto, Sarmiento, Saulog, Sabellano, Siao, Silverio, Singson, Singson Mihan, Sinsuat, Swansing Estrelita, Swansing Horacio, Suarez, Aleta, Suarez David, Suntay, C. Alvarado, Taduran, Talyado, Pambunting, Tan Alisa, Tan Angelina, Tan Samir, Tan Shari, Tan Sherni, Tejada, Teves Arnolfo, Teves Jose, Chanco, Tolentino, Torres Gomez, Tulfo, Tupas, Tutor, T. Alan, T. Diego, Umali Alfonso, Umali Maria Victoria, Unabia, Ungab, Uy Juliet, Uy Rolando, Valeriano, Valmayor, Vargas, Vargas Alfonso, Velasco, Veloso, Vergara, Villa, Villaferte, Villanueva Eduardo, Brother Eddie, Villanueva Noel, Villar, Villaraza, Suarez, Villarica, Violago, Yap Eric, Yap Victor, Yu, Zamora Ronaldo, Zamora Waikurat, Zarate, and Zubiri. Second call for House Bill 6931. Abante, Abaya, Acosta Alba, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amatong, Arbison, Aumentado, Banyas Nograles, Baronda, Barzaga, Biazon, Biron, Bulut, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kanama, Kawagdan, Castro Fredenil, Co Angelica, Co Elizaldi, Coanco, Cua, Dalipe, Daza, Defensor Michael, Duavit, D. Faustino Ino, Ebcas, Estrella, Fernandez, Fernando, Flores, Garin Sharon, Heron, Gonzales Sandro, Guico, Guya, Halosos Javier, Co Wilton, Conghun, Lagon, Leachon, Mangudadatu, Marcoleta, Mendoza, Mercado, Nava, Nograles Juan, Nunez Malañaon, Ong Jose, Uano Dizon, Panotes, Pichay, Pineda, Puno, Remulla, Revilla, Sagarbaria, Saulog, Siao, Suarez Aleta, Taduran, Tan Andisa, Tan Angelina, Teves Arnolfo, T. Alan, Uy Juliet, Veloso, Villaferte, Villaraza Suarez, Yu, and Zamora Ronaldo.
With 224 affirmative votes, 0 negative, and 0 abstention, House Bill number 6931 is approved on its third and final reading. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the consideration on third reading of House Bill number 638. For this purpose, may I request that the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the bill and thereafter to call the roll for nominal voting. So move, Mr. Speaker.
House Bill number 638 is directed for the Secretary General to read the title of the bill and call the roll of
Members.
for election.
House Bill 638, an act institutionalizing Philippine participation in international exhibition of the Biennale. Roll call of members. In consideration of House Bill number 638, Abante, Abaya, Abellanosa, Abu, Abueg Zaldivar, Abunda, Acop, Acosta, Acosta Alba, Jongad Vincula, Agabasa, Garao, Aglipay, Aguinaldo, Albano, Almario, Alonte, Alvarez, Franz, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Tematba, Amatong, Angara, Aragones, Albizon, Arenas, Arroyo, Archenza, Aumentado, Babasa, Bagatsing, Balindong, Bañas Nograles, Barba, Barbers, Baronda, Berzaga, Bascug, Bautista, Bautista Bendigan, Belmonte, Benitez, Bernos, Biason, Billones, Biron, Bolilla, Bondok, Bordado, Bravo, Brosas, Bulot, Bustos, Kabatbat, Cabochan, Cabredo, Cagas, Calderon, Calixto, Caminero, Campos, Canama, Cawagdan, Cari, Castelo, Castro, Franz, Castro, Ferdinil, Cayetano, Alan Peter, Compañero, Cayetano, Maria Laarnit, Celeste, Chato, Chipeco, Chungalao, Angelica, Coelzaldi, Cuanco, Collantes, Crisologo, Cuba, Quaresma, Cueva, Culyamat, Dagoc, Dalipe, Dalog, Daza de Jesus, de Venecia, Defensor Lawrence, Defensor Michael, Del Mar, de los Santos, de los Samantales, de Maporo, de Abdullah, de Maporo, Muhammad Khalid, Duavit Duhali Duterte, Di Faustino Ina, Di Faustino Michael III, D. Ian Paul, Ebka Secleo, Elago, Enverga, Erisa, Erigel, Ermita Buhain, Escudero, Espina, Espino, Estrella, Farinas Ria, Farinas Rudy Cesar, Fernandez, Fernando, Ferrer Juliet, Ferrer Luis, Flores, Fortuna, Frasco, Fuentebella, Gaita, Garbin, Garcia, Jose Enrique, Garcia, Pablo Jan, Garcia, Vincent, Garin Janet, Garin Sharon, Gastaya, Gatchalian, Gato, Heron, Go Ed, Go Mark, Gonzaga, Gonzales Aurel Don, Gonzales Neptali, Gonzales Sandro, Goseta, Gico, Gullas, Guya, Jaresco, Hataman, Hernandez, Herrera, D. Hofer, Halsos, Javier Jimenez, Co. Elisa, Co. Wilton, Kunhun, Labad, Lacson, Noel, Lagman, Lagon, Lara, Lesatin, Liachon, Legardo, Lim Kaichong, Lopez, Leola, Losotan, Makapagalaroy, Maceda, Madrona, Malapitan, Mangawang, Magundadato, Marcoleta, Mariano Hernandez, Marino, Marquez Martinez, Matba, Matugas, Mendoza, Mercado, Momo, Natividad Nagaño, Nava Nieto, Noel, Nograles, Jerko, Nograles, Juan Fidel, Nolasco, Núñez Balañao, Nominal Olivares, Ong Jose, Ong Roni, Ortega, Juan Dizon, Pacquiao Alberto, Pacquiao Rogelio, Padiernos, Paduana, Palma, Panchos, Panotes, Peña, Pichay, Pimentel, Pineda, Plaza Puno, Kimbo, Radaza, Ramirez Sato, Ramos, Rimulya, Revilla, Reyes, Rivera, Robes, Rodriguez, Roman Romero, Romualdez Ferdinand, Romualdez Yeda Marie, Romualdo, Romulo, Sakdalan, Sagar Baria, Sakaluran, Salcedo, Salimbangon, Salo Sanchez, Sancopan, Santos Recto, Sarmento, Saulug, Salvellano, Xiao Silverio, Sing Son Mihan, Sinsuat, Swansing Estrelita, Swansing Horacio, Suarez Aleta, Suarez David, Suntay, si Alvarado, Taduran, Talyada, Tambunting, Tan Alisa, Tan Angelina, Tan Shamir, Tan Shari, Tan Sherny, Tejada, Teves, Arnulfo, Teves, Jose, Tiangco, Tolentino, Torres Gomez, Tulfo, Tupas, Chutor, T. Alan, T. Diego, Umali Alfonso, Umali Maria Victoria, Unabia, Ungab, Uy Juliet, Uy Rolando, Valeriano, Valmayor, Vargas Alfonso, Velasco, Veloso, Vergara, Villa, Villafuerte, Villanueva, Brother Eddie, Villanueva, Noel, Villar, Suarez, Villarica, Violago, Yap Eric, Yap Victor, Yu, Zamora, Ronaldo, Zamora, Waycorat, Zarate, Zubiri. Second call for House Bill 638. Abante, Abaya, Acosta Alba, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amatong, Arbizon, Aumentado, Baños Nograles, Baronda Berzaga, Biason, Biron, Bulot, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kanama, Kawagdan, Castro Fredinil, Co. Angelica, Co. Elizalde, Cuanco, Cuwa, Dalipe, Daza, Defensor Michael, Duavit, Di Faustino Ino, Ebcas, Estrella, Fernandez, Fernando, Flores, Garin Sharon, Heron, Gonzales Sandro, Gico, Guya, Halusos, Javier, Co. Wilton, Kong Hun, Lagon, Liachon, Magundadato, Marcoleta, Mendoza, Mercado, Nava, Nograles Juan, Núñez Malañao, Noong Jose, Juano Dizon, Panotes, Pichay, Pineda, Puno, Rimulya, Revilla, Sagar Baria, Saulug, Xiao, Suarez Aleta, Taduran, Tan Alisa, Tan Angelina, Teves, Arnulfo, T. Alan, Uy Juliet, Veloso, Villafuerte, Villaras Suarez, Yu, Zamora Ronaldo.
With 223 affirmative votes, 0 negative, and 1 abstention, House Bill number 638 is now approved on its third and final reading. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the consideration on third reading of House Bill 7302. For this purpose, may I request the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the bill and thereafter to call the roll for nominal voting.
The Secretary General is directed to read the title of House Bill number 7302 and therefore call the roll of members.
House Bill number 7302, an act rationalizing the disability pension of veterans, amending for the purpose Republic Act 6948, entitled an act standardizing and upgrading the benefits for military veterans and their beneficiaries, as amended. Roll call of members in consideration of House Bill 7302. Abante, Abaya, Bellanosa, Abu, Abueg-Saldivar, Abunda, Ako, Acosta, Acosta Alba, Adiob, Advincula, Agabas, Agaraw, Aglipay, Aguinaldo, Albano, Almario, Alonte, Alvarez Franz, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amante Matba, Amatong, Angara, Aragones, Arbison, Arenas, Arroyo, Atienza, Aumentado, Babasa, Bagatsing, Balindong, Banyas Nograles, Barba, Barbers, Baronda, Barzaga, Bascug, Bautista, Bautista Bandigan, Belmonte, Benitez, Bernos, Biazon, Billones, Biron, Bolilla, Bondok, Bordado, Bravo, Brosas, Kulut, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kabotyan, Cabredo, Cagas, Calderon, Calixto, Caminero, Campos, Canama, Kawagdan, Cari, Castelo, Castro Franz, Castro Fredenil, Cayetano Alan Peter, Compañero, Cayetano Maria Laardi, Celeste, Chato, Chipeco, Chungalaw, Co Angelica, Co Elizaldi, Cojuanco, Collantes, Crisologo, Cua, Quaresma, Cueva, Culyamat, Dagoc, Dalipe, Dalog, Daza, De Jesus, De Venecia, Defensor Lawrence, Defensor Michael, Del Mar, De Los Santos, Del Oso Montalia, Dimaporo Abdullah, Dimaporo Muhammad Khalid, Duavit, Duhari, Duterte, D. Faustino Ino, D. Faustino Michael III, D. Ian Paul, Ebcas, Secleo, Elago, Enverga, Erice, Rigel, Ermita Buhain, Escudero, Espina, Espino, Estrella, Fariñas Ria, Fariñas Rudy Cesar, Fernandez, Fernando, Ferrer Juliet, Ferrer Luis, Flores, Fortun, Fortuno, Frasco, Petebella, Gaite, Garbin, Garcia Jose Enrique, Garcia Pablo Jan, Garcia Vincent, Garin Sharon, Garin Janet, Gasataya, Gatchalian, Gato, Heron, Go Ed, Go Mark, Gonzaga, Gonzales Aurelio Dong, Gonzales Neptali, Gonzales Sandro, Goriseta, Guico, Gullias, Guya, Haresco, Hataman, Hernandez, Herrera D, Hofer, Halosos, Javier, Jimenez, Co Elisa, Co Wilton, Congun, Labad-Labad, Lacson, Lacson Noel, Lagman, Lagon, Lara, Lazatin, Leachon, Legarda, Lim Kaichong, Lopez, Loyola, Lusotan, Macapagal, Arroyo, Maceda, Madrona, Malapitan, Mangawang, Mangudadatu, Marcoleta, Mariano, Hernandez, Mariño, Marquez, Martinez, Matba, Matugas, Mendoza, Mercado, Momo, Natividad Nagaño, Nava, Nieto, Noel, Nograles, Jericho, Nograles Juan Fidel, Nolasco, Nunez Malañaon, Huaminal, Olivares, Ong Jose, Ong Ronnie, Ortega, Uano Dizon, Pacquiao Alberto, Pacquiao Rogelio, Padiernos, Paduano, Palma, Pancho, Panotes, Peña, Pichay, Pimentel, Pineda, Plaza, Puno, Kimbo, Radaza, Ramirez Sato, Ramos, Remulla, Revilla, Reyes, Rivera, Robes, Rodriguez, Roman, Romero, Romualdez Ferdinand, Romualdez Sieda Marie, Romaldo, Romulo, Roque, Sakdalan, Sagarbaria, Sakaluran, Salceda, Salimbangon, Salo, Sanchez, Sangkopan, Santos Recto, Sarmiento, Saulog, Savellano, Siao, Silverio, Singson Mihan, Sinsuat, Swansing Estrellita, Swansing Horacio, Suarez Aleta, Suarez David, Suntay, C. Alvarado, Taduran, Talyado, Tambunting, Tan Alisa, Tan Angelina, Tan Samir, Tan Shari, Tan Sherni, Tejada, Teves Arnolfo, Teves Jose, Tianco, Tolentino, Torres Gomez, Tulfo, Tupas, Tutor, T. Alan, T. Diego, Umali Alfonso, Umali Maria Victoria, Unabia, Ungab, Uy Juliet, Uy Rolando, Valeriano, Valmayor, Vargas, Vargas Alfonso, Velasco, Veloso, Vergara, Villa, Villaferte, Villanueva, Eduardo, Brother Eddie, Villanueva Noel, Villar, Villaraza Suarez, Villarica, Villago, Yap Eric, Yap Victor, Yu, Zamora Ronaldo, Zamora, Waikurat, Zarate, and Zubiri. Second call for House Bill 7302. Abante, Abaya, Acosta Alba, Alvarez Senaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Arbison, Amatong, Aumentado, Banyas Nograles, Baronda, Barzaga, Biazon, Biron, Bulut, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kanama, Kawagdan, Castro Fredenil, Co Angelica, Co Elizalde, Coangco, Cua, Dalipe, Daza, Defensor Michael, Duavit, D. Faustino Ino, Ebcas, Estrella, Fernandez, Fernando, Flores, Garin Sharon, Heron, Gonzales Sandro, Guico, Halosos Javier, Covilton, Comhun, Lagon, Leachon, Mangudadatu, Marcoleta, Mendoza, Mercado, Nava, Nograles Juan, Nunez Balañaon, Ong Jose, Guaro Dizon, Panotes, Pichay, Pineda, Puno, Remulla, Revilla, Sagarbaria, Saulog, Siao, Suarez Aleta, Tadurat, Tana Lisa, Tana Angelina, Teves, T. Allen, Uy Juliet, Veloso, Villaferte, Villarasa Suarez, Yu, and Zamora Ronaldo.
With 226 affirmative votes, 0 negative, and 0 abstention, House Bill number 7302 is now approved on its third and final reading.
Mr. Speaker,
Majority Leader.
I move for the consideration on third reading of House Bill 7320. For this purpose, may I request the Secretary General be directed to read the title of the bill and thereafter to call the roll for nominal voting.
The Secretary General is hereby directed to read House Bill, the title of the bill of House Bill number 7320.
House Bill 7320, an act requiring government agencies to indicate the blood type of the individuals on their identification card, certificate, and licenses, and appropriating funds therefore. Roll call of members in consideration of House Bill number 7320. Abante, Abaya, Villanosa, Abu Abuya, Gonzalo Dibara, Bunda, ako sa Alba, Adyong, Advincula, Agabas, Agaraw, Aglipay, Aguinaldo, Albano, Almario, Alonte, Alvarez France, Alvarez Sinaro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Namantimat, Bamatong, Angara, Aragones, Arbison, Arenas, Arroyo, Atienza, Ventado, Babasa, Bagatsing, Balindong, Baños, Nograles, Barbers, Baronda, Bersaga, Bascug, Bautista, Bendigan, Belmonte, Benitez, Bernos, Biason, Billones, Biron, Bolilla, Bondok, Bordado, Bravo, Brosas, Bulot, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kabutyan, Cabredo, Cagas, Calderon, Calixto, Caminero, Campos, Canama, Cawagdan, Cari, Castelo, Castro France, Castro Fredinil, Cayetano, Alan Peter, Compañero, Cayetano, Maria Larni, Celeste Chato, Chipeco, Chungalaw, Angelica, Colzalde, Coanco, Colyantes, Crisologo, Cuba, Quaresma, Cueva, Colyamat, Dagook, Dalipe, Dalog, Daza, De Jesus, De Venecia, Defensor Losa, Defensor Michael, Del Mar, De Los Santos, De Los Montalio, De Maporo, Abdullah, De Maporo, Muhammad Khalid, Duavi, Duali, Duterte, D. Faustino Ina, D. Faustino Michael, Dr. D. Ian Paul, Ebka, Secleo, Ilago, Enverga, Erice, Erigel, Ermita Buhain, Escudero, Espina, Estrella, Farin Estrella, Farin Cesar, Fernandez, Fernando, Ferrer, Julius, Ferrer, Luis, Flores, Fortuno, Frasco, Puentebella, Gaita, Garbin, Garcia, Jose Enrique, Garcia, Pablo Jan, Garcia, Vincent, Garin Janet, Garin Sharon, Gastaga, Gatchalian, Gato, Heron, Go, Edgo, Mark, Gonzaga, Gonzales, Ariel, Dong, Gonzales, Neptali, Gonzales, Carlo, Groseta, Gigo, Gullas, Guya, Haresco, Hataman, Hernandez, Herrera, D. Hofer, Halusos, Javier, Jimenez, Elisa, Col Wilton, Kohud, Labad, Lacson, Noel, Lagman, Lagon, Lara, Dastin, Leachon, Legarda, Limlem, Kaichong, Lopez, Leola, Lusotan, Makapagala, Roy, Maceda, Madrona, Malapitan, Mangawang, Magundadato, Marcoleta, Mariano Hernandez, Marino Marquez, Martinez, Matba, Matugas, Mendoza, Mercado, Momo, Natividad, Daganyo, Nava, Nieto, Noel, Nograles, Jericho, Nograles, Manfidel, Nolasco, Nunez, Malanao, Nominal, Olivares, Ong Jose, Ong Roni, Ortega, Juana Dizan, Pacquiao Alberto, Pacquiao Real, Padjernos, Paduana, Palma, Pancho, Panotes, Peña, Pichay, Pimentel, Pineda, Plaza, Puno, Kimbo, Rodasa, Ramirez Sato, Ramos, Remulla, Revilla, Reyes, Rivera, Robles, Rodriguez, Roman Romero, Romualdez, Ferdinand, Romualdez, Eda Marie, Romualdo, Romulo, Roque, Sakdalan, Sagarbaria, Sacaluran, Salceda, Salimbangon, Salo Sanchez, Sacopan, Santos Recto, Sarmiento, Saudug, Sabeliano, Xiao, Silvero, Singson Mian, Sensuat, Swansing Estrita, Swansing Horacio, Suarez Aleta, Suarez David, Santay C. Alvarado, Taduran Talyado, Tambunting, Tanalisa, Tanan Gilia, Tanshamir, Tanshari, Tancharni, Tiada, Teves, Arnulfo, Teves, Jose, Tiangco, Talentino, Torres, Gomez, Tulfo, Tupas, Chutor, T. Alan, T. Diego, Umali, Alfonso, Umali, Maria Victoria, Unabia, Ungap, Uy Juliet, Uy Rolando, Valeriano, Valmayor, Vargas, Alfonso, Velasco, Veloso, Vergara, Villaferte, Villanueva, Brother, Villanueva, Noel, Villara, Suarez, Villarica, Villarago, Yap, Eric, Yap, Victor, Yu, Zamora, Ronaldo, Zamora, Waicorat, Zara, Tez, Zubiri. Second call for House Bill number 7320. Abante, Abaya, Acosta Alba, Alvarez Naro, Alvarez Pantaleon, Amatong, Arbison, Aumentado, Baños Nograles, Baronda, Bersaga, Biason, Biron, Bulot, Bustos, Kabatbat, Kanama, Kawagdan, Co Angelica, Co Elizalde, Coangco, Cuwa, Dalipe, Daza, Defensor Michael, Duavit, D. Faustino Ino, Ebcas, Estrella, Fernandez, Fernando, Flores, Garin Sharon, Heron, Gonzalez Sandro, Gico, Halosos, Javier, Co. Wilton, Kong Hun, Lagon, Liachon, Magdadato, Marcoleta, Mendoza, Mercado, Nava, Nograles 1, Nunes Palanyao, Owano Dizon, Panotes, Pichay, Pineda, Puno, Remulla, Revilla, Sagarbaria, Saulug, Siao, Suarez Aleta, Taduran, Tanalisa, Tanangelina, Teves Jose, T. Alan, Uy Juliet, Velasco, Villafuerte, Villaras Suarez, Yu Zamora Ronaldo.
With 226 affirmative votes, 0 negative, and 0 abstention, House Bill number 7320 is hereby approved on its third and final reading. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we direct the Secretary General to transmit all bills approved on third reading from August 24 to August 26. I so move, to the Senate. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. The Secretary General is hereby directed to transmit all bills of third reading to the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we now proceed with the additional reference of business and direct the Secretary General to read the title of communications and committee reports. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
The Secretary General is directed to read the messages from the Senate.
Additional reference of business message from the Senate. Message dated August 19, 2020, informing the House of Representatives that the Senate on event date passed Senate Bill number 1216.
To the Committee on Higher and Technical Education.
Message dated August 19, 2020, informing the House of Representatives that on August 3, 2020, the Senate designated Senator Christopher Bongo as additional conferee to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreement provisions of Senate Bill 1564.
To the Committee on Rules.
Committee report of the Committee on Legislative Franchises on House Bill number 7507.
To the Committee on Rules.
Reports of the Committee on Higher and Technical Education and Appropriations on House Bill number 7510, 7511, 7512, 7513, 7514, and 7515.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Wala na. Mr. Speaker, I move for a few minutes of suspension.
Session suspended.
Mr. Speaker,
Session resume.
Mr. Speaker, I move to adjourn the session until September 1 at 3 p.m.
Session adjourned. Session adjourned until Tuesday,
September 1.
September 1, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock.
Hello po.